The story I'm going to tell you, it's going to have three parts, and three parts of the story are vocabulary, awareness, and culture of asset management. And I'm hearing this from everybody, the lack of adaptability. Why aren't more people doing this? Awareness, we need to get the awareness out. So I'm going to share a story that I just experienced. It's a recent story. It's a relevant story. It just happened September 14th, just this week. So just this week, I was in Portland, Oregon, at the AWWA conference, 2022 conference. It's the American Water Works Association. So one of the first things you might ask me is, why is a DC employee going to a water association? Because we don't manage water assets, right? So why am I going there? Because we share a common vocabulary, acquisition costs, purchase date, useful life, condition, right? These are all things that apply to a water asset that also apply to buildings, fleet, facilities, all the other different types of assets. So me in particular, I wanted to know how they were capturing large chunks of data and communicating that through dashboards. That's my thing. I like to communicate big chunks of data through dashboards. I think that's the future. So that's why that's why I was there. And that was one of the first points I think relates and unites us. The second point I want to bring up is awareness. The awareness came up during a dinner conversation I had with some of the leaders that were there. We went out and we got dinner. And we're talking about scoring, prioritization, ranking. It's really cool. It's dynamic, it changes. And it's a really neat way to understand the difficulties we're at. What's the first project? What's the lowest project? Draw the line in the middle. You can afford what you could do above the line, right? And you can't afford what you can do below the line. Real simple concept. You want to score those. Make sure you do the ones at the top of the line. Make your constituents happy, make your mayor happy, make sure our priorities are done. So we're talking about prioritization. That soon led to a conversation of the funding gap, and this is going to get to awareness. So the funding gap, everybody here knows what the funding gap is. It's the things you can't do, consequences of inaction. What can you not do? What I found interesting with this group of people is, to them, the funding gap, that was the end of the story. Right? I'm not going to worry about what I can't do. I'm going to worry about the projects that I just got funding for. I'm going to look at that useful life cycle of what I can afford. I'm going to buy these now. I'm going to, put them in the system and manage them. Well, they didn't understand that we're not aware that there's a whole other world to asset management on what you can't do and the consequences of inaction. And they started to get some interest in this, and they asked me, how do you do it? So what we do with the funding gap, and we have a big funding gap here in the city. It's about $4 billion. We got it down to $3 billion. I had to give an example, and I'm going to give an example to you of how you do this and how we do this and how we chunk up that funding gap, because you have to understand what the problem is. The problem is it's more than you just can't afford it. There's this big problem that you have, and there's ways to solve it if you understand it. So I'm going to use in this example facilities. Facilities is a primary category. A project category to us for facilities is electricity. A project classification to the electricity is HVAC. So there's a three levels right there: facilities, electricity, HVAC. HVAC is, I'm going to give you an example. There's 300 projects we could not afford, 300 capital projects we could not afford that total $4 billion. HVAC is, I'm just going to make up this number, 200 million. We could not afford $200 million of HVAC. Well, now that you've just taken that funding gap and you diced it up into smaller buckets, well, now you could do something with that HVAC program. A simple thing you could do is maybe turn that into a P3 project. You can't do it. Maybe somebody else can. So that's a way to address a problem, something greater than you don't have the funding for. You could chop it up and look at it and dissect it and see if someone else can help you solve that problem. So that's awareness. Awareness is greater than the vocabulary. Both of these things you can learn. A third thing that came up still from this conference, and I think it's even greater than, and what I'm hearing from this group here is culture. barriers to entry to asset management, right? Why aren't more people doing this? You know, it's strange. So one thing I found really interesting when I was at the American Waterworks Association conference, there are hundreds of people there. The majority of the people there, you know what? They're all Canadian. You know, they really, why is that? I'll tell you why. It's because they have regulatory compliance rules or regulations that they've instituted. They're ahead of the game. So that's why they're ahead of us. We here, not so much. You know, we don't have those mandatory rules that will teach us these principles. You know, they're here, you know, in these courses or the School of Hard Knocks, but there's no awareness that there's these courses that are available, you know, to people. That's a problem. I kind of call it a barrier to entry, but really it's something that, you know, this group of people here can really solve for us here in the United States, because we don't have those regulatory compliances in place. So that's a culture, that's a mindset. How do you change that? That's very difficult to do, and that's a common theme that I'm hearing here. So in a nutshell, that just in that one conference that just happened, you know, just September 14th, just a couple of days ago, I think it really summarizes the state of this industry as, you know, lack of knowledge, lack of awareness, and a culture problem. I hope that story helped you and helped unite why we're all here.